Everything runs on energy. As I go through the day, where am I getting my energy from? What energizes the soul, gives that power to the soul so that I don't become tired, disheartened, or even irritable, impatient. What gives me that lightness, that enthusiasm, that energy as I go through the day? There might be the temptation to get that energy from outside. But in fact, I can harness that energy from inside anytime, in any situation. It all depends on the quality of my thoughts, attitude, awareness. The awareness of how fortunate I am. A fortune of what I have inside. We can, of course, be very grateful for what happens outside around us, but that will come and go. The fortune of what I carry within me. Simply the fortune of realizing I'm a soul, an eternal being, that I will get through anything. The fortune of knowing that all I seek is actually within the self, that within every human soul there are the treasures of peace, of love, of truth, of joy. Everything I seek, I carry within me. And the great treasure of knowing I am a child of God, that my spiritual DNA is of the highest quality. Realizing true fortune is actually connected to what is eternal. Remembering the eternal aspects of the self in terms of who I am, who I belong to, and what my potential is. This is the highest awareness of fortune. And when I experience it, remember it, automatically, in any situation, I am energized. Om Shanti.
Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Interview with the Raj Yogi. And our topic tonight is power of fortune, power of awareness of fortune. So I was just reflecting on even the commentary that was shared. I found that very powerful when you were sharing that what makes this very unique in terms of what is fortune, because there's a soul that I know who's not in deep in the study, but she was really interested in um, these daily focuses that we're having for January. So when we were sharing about fortune, I was thinking a lot about these ideas that we have of positive affirmations. Maybe even for souls that are like, what are we talking about here? But there's definitely an aspect where you can just tell yourself something again and again and again. I'm nice, I'm happy, everything is good. But when you were talking about eternal truths, and that's what the interviews are always about, is about Raja Yoga. And so that was actually a lot in my mind in terms of fortune that's very specific, it's very unique. And I just wanted to see if you could share a little bit about what makes this fortune that we're creating. That was the other thought of the title, was creating fortune at every step. But what is unique about this fortune, and what is unique about having a certain awareness fortune that's unique for Raja Yoga?
I know you mentioned this idea of positive affirmations, and what actually I was thinking about a little bit with this one is this idea of gratitude. So some souls have a practice of kind of going through what they're grateful for in their lives at the beginning or the end of the day. This gratitude practice, which of course is very lovely, but I've always found it a little bit precarious because often it's grateful for things happening outside in their life, the people in their life, or the health, or the skills, or the things. And it always felt a little precarious because they were always about being grateful for things that could change in the flash of an eye. And so, although it's, of course, creating a very good energy in the soul, it also is a bit volatile, or it can fluctuate because it's based on things that are temporal. And I've noticed for myself, being in this spiritual study, there were two things I found myself in conversation with souls about. One was that it's actually, after a while, exhausting. It has the opposite effect because this gratitude process is meant to keep the energy high and the soul light, but it actually becomes exhausting because it means I have to maintain those things I'm grateful for. So all my energy is going into making sure that those things remain okay in my life. And that can take a lot of work. So I was finding I just don't have the interest to use my energy that way. So what we're actually talking about is not the fortune of the things happening outside of me, but actually fortune for things that are within me, that I carry with me through time. So rather than temporal, we call those eternal. That's one aspect. But the other, fortune's connected to wealth. And so I was having a very interesting conversation with a lawyer today about this idea of inheritance. And, that it's said that sometimes children even are waiting for their parents to move on so they can inherit the wealth, the fortune. And then they do, if there's siblings, they come into conflict over the fortune. So again, this external fortune that can actually even lead to conflict. And being around a soul who was actually told, was very, I can understand what their parent was doing. They were told, when I pass away, you will not get any inheritance from me. I will not leave you anything in my will. And they believed it. And what actually the parent was doing was they said, I will give you every opportunity to develop yourself while I'm around, really supported schooling, everything. So that when the parent left the body, there was so much the soul carried within them, the confidence, etc., that they didn't need that other fortune. The parent had invested a lot in the child, that they had the fortune within themselves. So in any situation, they could continue to, they had a lot of resilience. So which is more important, that volatile fortune, which now is super volatile in today's world, or the fortune I carry with me? I think that's what we're reflecting on.
It's interesting you're saying it gets exhausting. And for some reason, sorry, I hope this isn't offensive, but when I hear positive affirmations, that in itself feels very tiring. And I don't know if it's because of trying to keep having certain thoughts. I mean, I know you were talking about that aspect of trying to sustain what you're grateful for, but in terms of having to sustain, positive thoughts when there isn't a deep sense of understanding of what is true, and regardless of what is happening in scenes and in the superficial, because there is a saying that everything happens for a reason, and many have heard that saying, but it's still kind of like this quiet hope inside, and it's usually sort of looking back in the past. And again, um, that was just something I was really thinking about as well. I really was keenly aware that there's such a difference in terms of this fortunate awareness through Raja Yoga, um, versus just that faint hope inside. If you have any thoughts to share about that.
We talk about in the Course that where there's purity, there'll definitely be positivity. But where there's positivity, there may not be purity. And what that means is that, yes, I have very positive, appreciative thoughts, but there's still a little bit of a desire behind them, that, I'm positive and hoping for this outcome. And that's very powerful use of the mind. But there's still a little bit of desire. Whereas pure, again, is linked to what is eternal or truth, that whatever's happening, it will be beneficial. I just want what is beneficial, if you will. So it's not linked to any particular outcome I desire. And today, I was in a meeting, and I was really touched and inspired, because one of the souls in the meeting, they're sitting there on Zoom. Often they can't be in the meeting because Zoom is not going to work, and there's a reason. But they're sitting there and they're just having a cup of tea and looking. But what we're aware of is they are sitting in a country that is in the middle of a war. So what they were explaining to us, and they're looking very light and easy and calm. And what they were explaining is that there's a cycle. Every 2 weeks, there is, I can't remember what they called it, but basically it's a bombing. And it temporarily cuts out the electricity. So it can take a few hours, a day, or 3 days to bring the electricity back online. And for those 3 days, everyone in the country sort of has figured out what to do. As she said, they've adjusted. But this cycle, every 2 weeks, there's bombing, adjustment, operate, bombing, adjust. So to have positive thoughts in that scenario, what are you going to, you know? So, but what I realize is the soul has so much within themselves, cultivated so much um, resources and fortune within the self, that whatever is going on around them, they really understand that what the bigger picture is, why this is happening. So that's connected more to a pure understanding, so that then they can stay really focused on continuing whatever's going on around them, continuing to cultivate those inner resources, so they can be a source of purity in whatever situation is unfolding. So that's the most fortunate stage to provide in those kinds of scenarios, We've heard the we've heard the example, the personal sharing of another soul in the study during 9/11. Again, what is your positive thought going to be? But to be a pure presence because of what the fortune you've had. You might be leaving the body. Those around you might be leaving the body. Usually a positive thought at those times is, I hope I don't die. But I could. So what fortune will I have at that time? What will gratitude look like at that time? So these are the extreme situations that are going on that are really testing the depth of our sense of fortune at this time.
Do you feel that unless one is able to, start to learn about these eternal truths, that they would be able to feel and know the difference between positive versus pure within the context of this tonight's topic about fortune? Because in a way, it could look quite superficial. Just feel like I have fortune at every moment, and even spirituality has that kind of reputation. It's, sitting on cloud nine, completely oblivious to what's happening around you. You're not practical. You don't even know what's happening on the world stage, et cetera, et cetera.
It's actually almost the exact opposite, that one does actually know what's happening. And so this idea of positive versus pure, that positive will be based more on a limited perspective of what's going on. And so then I start to create what I think will be beneficial based on my limited understanding. Pure is knowing what actually is going on, the big picture. And so now my concept of what is beneficial will be based on the big picture rather than the small picture. So pure means, again, it's based on truth or the unlimited eternal understanding. So sort of like these little circles inside of a big circle. So am I connected to the little circles, or am I really aware of the big picture? And sometimes, the example we use is a drama, a storyline. And I remember once seeing a story, very powerful in terms of what, you wonder what touchings these story writers are having to come up with it. It was a very odd little story or movie, but in it there were all these little vignettes. So the common theme in all the vignettes was this particular violin. So it was called the red violin. But this little violin was the common item. But you have a vignette of a little boy, I don't know, in 1700s or 1800s, auditioning in front of royalty. And just as he's about to play, he drops dead of a heart attack. End of story. Then you have another same violin, but in a different scene 100 years later, where this incredibly talented but slightly mad musician, suddenly he's being shot at with a bullet. End of story. It's these odd little. So if I'm just parachuting into these little stories, I'm like, oh, I hope that boy is okay. I hope he gets here. Oh, I hope that violinist. You just start to have positive thoughts based on. But there's an overarching story, and this movie was really training one. Am I in the limited, or do I understand the point? So as you sort of start to link, find the common thread, which actually isn't all these little people, but what the concept that the red violin, which is actually exploring an ethical question. That was the whole thing. And so by the end, it kind of becomes clear, oh, there was an overarching storyline here. Am I connected to that, or was I stuck in each little? So am I aware of the overarching storyline in terms of this world? And that's an eternal or unlimited perspective. So then I'm plugging, and it has a lot to do with the story of what goes on inside the human soul. So what am I plugged into?
Thank you for sharing. I felt that when you were talking about purity versus positivity has a lot to do with a limited perspective. And just trying to be positive versus a really unlimited, eternal understanding what's happening. That I feel really perhaps will help souls understand because we used to give the pure thinking course and souls grappled with that, and perhaps makes you also wonder too, how much do I understand to be able to share it with others as well. But even when you were sharing, I was thinking so much today about just experiencing being a soul and just feeling that nothing belongs to you and that feeling the fortune of different aspects that I learn and study. And a huge one, I think you mentioned in the meditation, is that eternal relationship with God. But there were just moments in the day where I just wanted to feel that there's nothing that belongs to me. It's just me. I'm not physical, but it's such a rich feeling. And I felt that was essential, that at any moment, anything could snag you, anything could just influence you, just because we've been used to that for such a long time in body consciousness. But the reason why I was sharing about that, in terms of fortune, and we were listening to a senior student share today that there are some who just feel like they're just unfortunate and no matter what's happening. And I don't know if souls really ever know that. And I don't know if that's, you can use as a blanket statement for every soul. Everyone is, unique. But I found that really interesting. There seems to be a connection between feeling what comes to me or what comes from me is bad. And what do you feel is that connection between soul consciousness and just these ideas?
So definitely the three aspects that we explore in the unlimited is soul, supreme soul, and karma. And we have this word kismet that's connected to destiny. So I think that's the idea of fortune or misfortune. But what we again realize it's actually what I'm carrying within me that then will come into expression. Whatever is emerged in any given time will come into expression. And that's actually what's creating or not creating fortune. So we actually use the word fortune interchangeably with role in terms of how am I playing my part is actually creating the future of my part. This is called law of cause and effect. And many find this disheartening, but it's actually incredibly empowering. And that puts us on either side of a very important line of either victim or empowered, or we say emperor empowered. That and it's so powerful at this time, this particular um, position. Am I one that still feels that things are happening to me, whether it's good or bad? And that again is where the gratitude thing can subtly get entangled. Or am I one that feels that no, I can shape what's happening to me, given the law of karma, that I can change my attitude or my vision or what I'm expressing. That's in my hand. I can put something else out there, which again will create something different. So which side am I on? And if I'm on the side of empowered, and it's going to lead me to look inside the self, I can't. Victim is always looking outside at what's going on out there, but looking inside the self. And as a child of the Supreme Soul, we each are gifted with many capacities that we want to emerge and bring into expression.
It's very powerful and transformative if one, just not knowing themselves and have had like a chain of series of experiences and events in their life where they just feel like, you know, that they aren't fortunate. It's completely understandable. And to be in this study to actually feel that you can change that. Now this may be a sensitive question, but this is probably more than 10 years ago. There was this series or something that's called The Secret, where you can have certain positive thoughts. And I guess it's along the lines of positive affirmations. But souls have experienced that, that you have certain thoughts enough and then something manifests. So, in terms of that piece, when we're talking about in the study where you can transform your destiny, What do you do with that in light of, again, positive affirmations, the secret? Like, is that like unlimited? Is that, what does one do with that?
So I think what this idea of the secret definitely highlighted is the power of the mind, especially when the heart is into it too. Really powerful. Yes, definitely. If I think hard enough and with all my heart, I'm probably going to create that. So as I used to be told in school, be careful what you hope for, you might actually get it. So I could be investing so much of my energy into, I want this to happen. This would be so beneficial if this happened. I'm convinced it'll be beneficial. And I make it happen. And then it turns out to be something really disastrous. There's so many storylines like this, the Midas touch, right? So King Midas, who anything, asked for this boon, anything that I touch will turn to gold. Sounds really good, doesn't it? Until he went to embrace his daughter. She turned to gold. Stuck. So if anything, I think what that told us is, hey, the mind's very powerful. But if it's not connected to purity, be careful what you ask for, because it might, in the short run, look like a really good idea. Again, if I'm not connected to the big picture, but in the long run, it could really create havoc or misfortune.
I feel like it comes back to, again, as you're mentioning about temporary attainments and what is fortune. And I know we have been sharing about this. Do I use spirituality for temporary gains? And again, it's not like souls are trying to, perhaps. Maybe it's just maturing, I guess, and understanding about just what is spirituality, who we are as souls. But just that I know, because we're running out of time, but the link do you feel between fortune and self-worth slash self-respect?
I wonder if, in essence, the greatest fortune is simply to be pure. So, pure means that rather than ego, there's self respect. Rather than greed, there's generosity. Rather than anger, there's love. In other words, none of these we call acquired elements are in the soul, that I am in a state of self worth. So that would mean the most fortunate soul is one who develops a relationship with God and uses that supreme being just to make the self pure. That's perhaps the greatest fortune. It's a bit like, I used to laugh this idea of Aladdin and the magic lamp, and he's given 3 wishes. Maybe it's a memorial of supreme soul drama. I don't know, but I used to think, why not just one? Like, really get that one wish that really is going to give you everything. And so if there's one, pure or positive, whatever thought, this pure desire just to become pure, if you have that, you get all fortune. All fortune. If you have that self-worth, that self-respect, that fullness within the self, that contentment, if you have that, you are master of the world. So, what is the most pure, fortunate focus one can have is to use the Supreme Soul to make oneself pure.
I'm going to squeeze in one more question because I feel it's related. If someone is lacking self respect, lacking self worth, do you feel that that really affects them being able to constantly be, again, unlimited, not temporary, but to be able to create that fortune in the face of things happening? Do you feel there's a big connection between restoring that self respect and there's that whole chicken and the egg thing? Where do you start?
Perhaps the fortune is for one to first recognize that that is at the seed of the issue. That would be very fortunate. And second, to overcome anything that will distract the soul from being able to address that issue, because that's a big one. And the ego will do everything in its power to distract the soul, keep it busy, distracted. So these 2 fortunes, I recognize that is the issue. That's already going to be an expression of self respect, just to recognize that that's the issue. And second, to not be distracted from healing that, being able to focus on that. I think that's the number one thing God wants to bestow on the soul, or the fortune that God wishes to share with the soul, is to restore that self respect. But we keep getting distracted, right? So, and then we're again using God for other things, right? So, just this is purity, self respect, very high form of purity. I think it is the form of purity. So, to use that relationship, to not be distracted, that's very compassionate for the self. So, that would be fortune too.
Thank you. Wow, I could keep going with this topic. I found it very powerful in terms of just transforming one's own sense of awareness. But we will go into reflection now.
As I, the soul, travel through time, I begin to use all the gifts within the self to sustain me on my journey. Eventually, they might feel like they run out. And so I start to look outwards for sustenance, for fortune. But there comes a very fortunate moment in my journey where I have the wisdom to recognize that the most beautiful and benevolent thing I can do for the self is to replenish the lost treasures within, not from outside, but by going inwards and upwards through spirituality, to turn my attention to the source of fortune, the bestower of fortune, the Supreme Soul, who has this most magical and precious part of restoring all the value and fortune within every soul, all those treasures of peace, of power, truth, of bliss, to simply have these treasures replenished within the self makes me a very, very fortunate soul. Om Shanti.
So we have an announcement we haven't sent out yet because we don't have the registration link prepared fully just yet. We hope to send it tonight, if not early tomorrow. But please save the date for this Sunday, January 15th. It is World Meditation Hour, the third Sunday of the month, but it is a special month, and it is in light of January 18th, as we remember the first student of this spiritual study, Brahma Baba, his efforts, his recognition, his depth of understanding. We can go on and on. And so it's dedicated to him in terms of inspiring our efforts as well. So that will be in Scarborough, January 18th on, January 15th on Sunday, 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Save that date in your agenda, and we'll be sending out the registration link soon for Eventbrite. But it would be lovely for you to join. This would probably be the first World Meditation Hour we've had since the pandemic, where we can have souls come on site. So we really hope that souls will be able to come. Feel free to visit the center's website for other upcoming sessions, but we always have a workshop in English at the Inner Peace Center on the first Saturday of the month. So thank you again for joining with us. If you have topics you wish to share, let us know by text. Text on Instagram, or you can email us or just send us a message here on YouTube as well. Thank you again for joining. Shanti.